Hey guys. Hey. Thank you so much for joining us for the 11th edition of Passion Projects with Laura Gluhanich. Right? Did I do it? Okay, cool. Awesome. I have a really hard time with pronouncing people's name. Turns out the internet doesn't tell you how to do that. So thank you guys so much. I'm Julie. I am a designer here at GitHub, but I'm also the creator. Thank you. Thanks. This talk series is about all of you in this room. It's not about me. I am the creator and host of Passion Projects, and I'm super psyched to have you all here. Thanks for coming, and without further ado, Laura.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. That's it. Now, thank you for coming. Thanks to GitHub for hosting this amazing series, and to Julianne for shepherding it to where it is today. Thank you to Bobe Cespedes, who will be performing later. Please stick around, get another drink. We're going to have a dance party. Yeah. Sidebar, if you haven't yet, definitely head to YouTube after this and check out some of the other speakers and some of the other talks. They're amazing. There's a great amount of variety. And I've seen them all at least once. So, hi, I am Laura Gluhanich, as mentioned. A lot of you probably didn't know my last name was Gluhanich before today, because you see me on the internet as Laura Glu. So, I had a few goals tonight. First of all, how many people work online with users? Most people in this room, probably, some people online. So hopefully what I share today will appeal and apply to something that you do with your users online. Basically, I'm just going to talk a little bit how I got to where I am today in community online and some lessons learned along the way. So 1986 is when I found out that our family got our first computer. I didn't remember because I was 6 years old. But I definitely was using it to, playing around the file system. I remember playing games like Kicks and Montezuma's Revenge, if anyone is playing, yeah, Commodore 64. Writing terrible journal entries as I got older than 6, probably. But we first got online in 1994. Thank you, AOL. Yeah. Yeah. I was El Glu at AOL. I don't know if we chatted ever. Maybe? Which I'm still pretty proud of, that short moniker. But that was really my first exposure to community online, and again, was in the chat rooms a lot with my friends, and was also involved with a lot of different music communities online. So if you were in the 90s a fan of Dave Matthews Band, Guster, yeah, right? If you're a true fan, you call him Dave. That was me. And so, yeah, the first lessons I learned are really from these communities online. And one thing that I wanted to talk about first, yeah, and actually a few of us have talked about this recently. So it's interesting because anonymity is seen as something sort of new and hot, but it's been around forever online. And I feel like in the 90s, nobody really knew who you were online. And that New Yorker cartoon where it's "No one knows you're a dog," that's actually from 1993, which is pretty crazy. But what you did was you would ask everyone what their age, sex, and location was, for those of you who might not be old enough to remember. And the sort of interesting thing was you could say whatever you wanted in response to that. And so you could be whomever you wanted on the other side. AOL always knew kind of who you were, but the person on the other side of that conversation didn't. And I think that was a really interesting and cool feature, because I know I was able to sort of express different parts of my personality, different facets of my personality, and how I might want to participate online doing that. And it was pretty safe. It wasn't connected to me as a real life person. And so that's why I think that sort of got away from us in the past few years, and everything became interconnected, and you needed to be the same person everywhere, and almost to a detriment. So people were afraid to sort of share things, or they may not participate in places where they didn't feel safe. I think there's some negativity to anonymity online. I think it's really important that there are safety checks in place, and that potentially companies actually have insight into who's doing what. But I think considering anonymity and learning about it early on is something important that I've kind of taken along the way. So something that's needed with anonymity is structure. And next show of hands, how many people here are Belle and Sebastian fans? Yeah, that's not surprising. Yep, okay. We're a quiet bunch, but we're very delicate. So I don't know if any of you are on the Sinister mailing list, which was the fan mailing list for Belle and Sebastian, based in Scotland, run by a woman who went by Honey. She was a list mum. But the thing that was really interesting about this mailing list was that there was a it was simple, but it was a time-consuming onboarding process. And so when you first joined, you were in the nursery. And so when you were in the nursery, it was read-only. You couldn't actually participate in the community. You got to see the guidelines, you got to see the personalities that were engaging, and you got to see what the norms were. After any number of weeks, whenever Honey determined, you could then enter the community and fully participate as a member. But this is something that has stood out to me from those early days as a great tool to use for community. And I think there's other ways that this is done. You can gate your community by money, making people pay to participate, and that certainly keeps up quality. It makes people opt into it. You can also do gating where people need to accomplish tasks to access certain parts of your community or certain features. But I think as you're approaching how your user base engages with each other and with you, it's good to be thoughtful about how their first few days are and how you can introduce them to the community and introduce the community to them. All right. So I wasn't just online in the 90s. I also worked full-time. And I worked while I was in school and then after school in restaurants. So I spent just over 10 years in every level of restaurant management, dishwashing, hostessing. And the things that managing an online community is pretty much a straight corollary to managing a restaurant, oddly enough. What I saw as my job in being a restaurant manager was making sure everyone was happy. And that's definitely what I do today as well. Sort of like this flip side of that, my real job was getting yelled at. It was getting yelled at by customers. It was getting yelled at by the back of the house. It was getting yelled at by suppliers and by my bosses. And that also translates to online community. But the important thing was basically that I had to remove myself as an individual from most situations that came up and really focus on who I was dealing with and how to make them happy and how to resolve whatever issues might have come up. And the thing with restaurants, you have to resolve those things immediately, and they can get pretty heated. People can get pretty fired up about the food they're eating. And so it taught me early that, how to sort of diffuse situations, how to fix them, and also importantly, how to fix it in a way that keeps your customer coming back. Because it's a lot more expensive to get a restaurant customer actually than it is to get a customer online or a user. So it was really important to mitigate as much as possible and to diffuse things by keeping people happy. And the best way to diffuse situations was to build relationships with everyone. Really to best solve problems both in real world and online is to build relationships with everyone involved, back of house, front of house, neighbors, community members. You never know who you might need to borrow food from. You never know which partner might be able to help you out with whatever you're trying to achieve with your user base. Yes. All right, so that was offline. So I got out of restaurants and moved to the Bay Area in 2006, and my first job online was at a company called NING. And anyone here familiar with NING? Yeah. You are now. NING was an amazing platform. It's still around today. It was started early in 2005, but when I was there in 2007, its goal was to be a platform where anyone could create a social network around anything, which sounds a bit terrifying, but it is actually a really great way for people to express themselves and participate in different types of organizations and different communities online. And so this was pretty much the best way to get a look at all shapes and sizes of community from every perspective. Our team was responsible for keeping as many users happy as possible, which is, as we all know, challenging. The most interesting sort of thing that I took from this, however, was A/B testing community. And I don't think that really there's too many places where this is an opportunity that you get. And I don't even mean our user-based community, I mean the NING community that we manage as community managers. So if you owned a network on NING, or if you created one, then you could participate in the NING network creators community on NING. And that was basically originally created as a conduit for these network creators to us at the company. And when we started it, we were so excited, and we were very responsive, and we replied to every post very quickly, and we didn't set up guidelines, and we posted all the time, and we were available 24/7. And it turns out that that was not scalable. And after a certain sort of amount of activity, the shift of the community actually turned pretty negative, because they didn't see us, because we could not be everywhere all the time, they kind of turned against us. There was also just some other problems around, because of the lack of guidelines, there wasn't really any sort of, again, like structure of how people were supposed to act. So there's a lot of self-promotion, there's a lot of spam. And it just sort of got to the point where we couldn't really manage it in a good way anymore, and so we made the decision to shut it down. And that was really hard. That was really hard because the company is based on community. And it was really hard for our team at the time to sort of figure that out and figure out how to communicate it. In the long run, it was the right idea, but at the time, most of us were not happy about it. However, about less than a year later, we decided that this was still a really important channel, and so we decided to recreate the community from scratch, from zero, and that became my job. And that was an amazing experience, because what I decided to do was to co-create the community with the network creators. So we renamed it creators.ning.com, big change. But every step of the way, we had involvement from our users. We drafted up guidelines and got their feedback. We picked which features we were going to have and how much they would be available with their feedback. We set up guidelines around what your profile could look like, so you had to use a real name. It didn't necessarily have to be like your name on your birth certificate, but you couldn't use your network name as your name. You couldn't, use it as a self-promotion, basically. We also worked with them, so all of the initial content was seeded from users, and we had one post that was the guidelines, but everything else came from our initial bunch of creators. And the way we were really thoughtful, basically, the way that we picked that initial group was from our previous group, but it was basically everyone that we trusted as great citizens of our previous network. And that didn't mean that they were our biggest promoters. That meant that they treated the other network creators really well. They were very helpful. They were resources. They were generally positive about the platform. They were obviously passionate about it. But they did criticize. But when they criticized, it was constructive. It was for the greater good. So all of those individuals, there were probably, I think there were 8 or 10 of them total in the first group. So they were right by our side when we launched this next community. And we also decided to sort of roll it out slowly to make sure that these initial stages were really setting the seed and the stage of how we wanted it to grow and how we wanted people to participate. And so we invited those 10 people, and they all brought in content, and then we invited another, I think, 100 or 200, and with the idea of like, here is what this is looking like, here is the content that we're looking for, and they all started posting content as well. And then we sort of opened it up, bit by bit, and within 3 months we had 30,000 users, which was really good because they were all high quality, they were participating at least to a certain extent. They had to get through that, profile creation of required information that, was meaningful. So that's something that basically I strongly believe, I know a lot of other people in the community space believe as well, but it's something that Fiona and I talk to our clients about a lot, where you there's a pom-pom. You have to get feedback from your users early and often, and you have to use them to help determine what kind of community you want to grow. Okay. I was going to do the bongos in between each slide, but it was too much. So after NING, I moved on to About.me. Yeah, Luke. And About.me was a very different community experience. I was the only person. I was the community manager team. It was me. I was also the support team and the marketing team and the communications team, which is pretty typical for startups. So I know a lot of you guys out here are familiar with that. But a big lesson that I took from About.me was, as your community changes, you have to change as well. You have to evolve your product. You have to evolve your communication strategy. And that sounds like highfalutin, but it's really just, how do you talk about your product? Where do you talk about it? How do you explain it? How do you explain the value? How do you explain the features? And specifically for About.me, it started out as a very targeted launch towards a lot of people in the room, right? Like influencers, technically savvy people, design savvy people, people who are early adopters. And the people that joined the platform initially got it. They got the product, they understood it, they created beautiful pages, and there's this great, beautiful user base. As the user base grew and spread, it became clear that that initial sort of experience wasn't for everyone. And the quality sort of dropped, and people weren't really sure what they were doing. There was a lot of confusion. This became pretty clear to the entire team, all 15 of us. That's the entire company. And so as a team, we determined like what can be done to address this new group of users who want to get value from this. And we completely changed the onboarding process. We changed the language. We changed how we were talking to people, how much email we were sending. We actually increased it because people like email who don't get it all the time like we do. So the idea of being very holistic in your approach and making sure that sort of an entire product and the entire team is on board with changes is something that I took away from that. And I think it's something that is good to check in on your products and on your user base. Like, is that demographic changing? Where is it changing to? How should your product change? And obviously you're not changing the core value, but how are you communicating that? How are you showing it to them? Ta-da! Signal Camp. So, I don't even know how long it's been. I feel like it's been too short. Signal Camp is the next stop in my community management journey. And as you may have learned, my co-founder is up here with the pom-pom, Fiona, which is awesome. Here is a few of our clients in the past, a few who are present. And we basically have taken both of our experience from community, and especially that holistic approach, and apply it to products and to companies. So what we're really passionate about, I call it user engagement, because it's every time your users interact with your product or your brand or your company, we care about that. And to a little bit of an obsessive detail, we want to make sure that your error messages match your voice. We want to make sure that the way your team members are talking about your company is sort of consistent. Because your community is everywhere, and they should have a similar experience or a similar sort of take on your company outside of the product that you're actually providing them. I think it's really important. It's something that I especially think is important early on, and actually very manageable early on. We have a few points, including error messages, but my thing is no reply emails addresses, and no text-only emails. Those are like the little things. But we basically just look at every piece of content and everything that you're doing and making sure that you're communicating it with your user base well. And the way that we do that is by talking to your users and getting their feedback and co-creating, again, what that voice is going to look like, what resonates with them, what makes sense. So the other thing that we do with Signal Camp that is important and good is we focus on a work-life balance. And there's been a lot written about either following your passion or work-life balance and how work-life balance can benefit you. But I think work-life balance actually really benefits your company and your product and your team. And for community members or for community managers or anyone who's dealing with a user base, it's good to participate in communities elsewhere. So the communities I participate in are still the online music fan communities. I moved on from Dave Matthews. Sorry, Dave. But really? Okay. All right. The climbing community, the library volunteer community, the ladypreneur community. Yeah. Both the greater community and a group that I meet with on the regular. And I pull learnings from all of the learnings. Is that a word? I pull what I learn from all of those places and take it back with me to the companies that I work with and to the products that I work on. And I think the important thing about work-life balance is doing that. You can't just use your product. You can't just participate in your own community because you're just getting that one perspective. And you need to bring in the perspective as a community member, as maybe a community leader who is not organizing, as a community member just joining or leaving. And how is that process for you? And how can you translate that to the work that you're doing with your user base? So in summary, consider your onboarding. How are you bringing people into your community? Be nice and build relationships with everyone. Co-create your community. Make sure that your users are involved. Evolve your community with your user base, and then participate elsewhere to bring it back. Thank you. Oh, do we do Q&A now? That was really quick, right?
No, that wasn't very quick.
Okay.
Perfect talk. I don't know what this is. I might have to just talk into your microphone.
Hey.
Get real close up here. Okay, so that was awesome. Can we get another round of applause for more pom-poms? I love those pom-poms. Brought lots of questions. I get to ask mine first. I feel like that's the only advantage of like doing all the work I do for this is like I just get to ask my own questions.
Testing.
Testing. Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Everyone's having way too much fun. Stop having fun. This isn't about fun, you guys. It's about fun.
I like to see the drinking.
Yeah.
Or not drinking if you're not into it. That's cool.
No. I have a really strong mocktail game. And I think you all should too. It's a big priority
your coconut.
of mine.
Not a euphemism.
Thank you. I also like it. Okay, I'll stop boring you. Let's get to Laura.
Okay.
Okay. Talk more. Drink more. So I've evolved my process. If you've ever been to a passion project show before, I usually have index cards, and there has not been a single time where I haven't gotten up and just dropped the cards everywhere. So I'm learning, so you all know. So I like to refer to you as a professional human. I think you're really good at being personable and like a really good human. And every time that I've met someone that first of all, everyone loves Laura. I don't think if you've ever met someone that has worked with Laura, they're just like, oh, she's just the best human. And I'm like, okay. So one of the things I've asked Laura
Thanks,
is
Mom
like,
and Dad.
How did you, they're watching though, right? I mean.
So sidebar, my mom sent me an email today, which is great, and that said, like, break a leg, you're speaking tonight, right? And I replied, yeah, here's the link, you can stream it. And she wrote back, do I have to stream it while you're speaking? And I was like, yeah. So hopefully they are. I really hope they are. And I love you. And if not, it'll be on YouTube.
Yeah, it will be. All of these are on YouTube, by the way. So you talked a little bit about like your service background and having to deal with people. I mean, is that where you get your ability to be able to be a great communicator and deal with high pressure situations that community people end up having to deal with?
Yeah. Kind of as I touched on, once you've dealt with people in real life yelling at you, because they didn't know there was olive oil in their pasta. So like it correlates pretty well to someone getting mad at your free service for something. But I guess, and that's like really flippant, because the other thing is just when you're dealing with people face to face, you learn a lot more about what they're bringing to the table and what they are bringing just to that day. And so if, when I was talking about the front of the house and the back of the house, it's like there are people that might have just had a bad day, and or they have like real shit going on that you need to sort of be aware of. And so it puts it in perspective in a lot of ways.
Totally. I like to say that behind every troll is pain.
Let's hope so.
A lot of pain and hurt. So I feel for you all out there.
Yeah.
So you just started your own company. Why did you decide after About.me to start your own thing?
Yeah. So this is interesting. So actually it was Fiona's idea to start this company.
Shout out to Fiona. She's also wonderful.
Fiona Pom Pom Tang, Grubby Tang. And she approached me about it, and I was flattered, first of all, that she would want or consider me to start a company with her. And also that she hit me at like just the right time. It was fall of 2011. And I had just finished up like 3 or 4 weeks straight of coffees with entrepreneurs and coffees with founders and coffees with community people, and where they're like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. And I'm totally into that. I still do that all the time. But I was just kind of getting a little like, I don't know, sad, or just like I felt like I'm sitting here talking to you for an hour and I don't really know if anything's changing. Like, I don't know if I'm having an impact on how you're building your company or how you're building your community. I just feel like I'm talking at you. And so when she approached me, it just was kind of like, yeah, let's like actually make a difference. And let's like, for all these companies that want to have great community and don't know how to do it, let's work with them.
Which is almost all of them. Like, I feel like, well, not that everyone is bad at community, but like, it's just such like a, I think we've seen like this really really awesome transition actually back into like the people economy.
Yeah.
What's been your experience as far as like coming from NING? That was like the beginning of that sort of like that, making platforms for people. Like, how do you think that's changed in like the last couple of years?
That's a good question. I do think there's just a lot more awareness around other people, other team members, other experts in various fields, developers and designers and product people. I think there's just a lot more awareness around the importance of engaging with your users and bringing sort of community skills higher up in an organization and making it part of your core. I think that's probably the biggest difference.
People are important,
awesome.
Turns out. So you again talked about your experience at NING, and like NING in my mind, especially like during like the startup phase, most famous for like their like massive, and I know people who were laid off from NING. If you don't know someone that's been laid off by NING, you probably, I don't know, you live under a rock. Yeah.
You all know me now.
You all know me, yeah. The whole point of that question, we're done, we can move on. Now, what was it like having to, shut down that community and like be taken away from something that you really love doing and a team that I assume you really loved being a part of? Right.
Yeah. And so there was a big round of layoffs at NING that actually happened. It was after that sort of like the community aspect. And so the stuff that happened at NING was crazy, like not in a bad way, but I saw so many different changes. When I joined, I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble for like saying this. I don't know who would get me in trouble, but Gosh, actually. You know, I joined in 2007, and I think we were just breaking the million user point. I think it was 1 million users. And at that point in time, NING was, we called it content neutral, which meant you could have adult content on NING. And so there are lots of very interesting networks that were completely allowed that had very adult content that was something that everyone on our team had to deal with and, you know, provide support for and like tips and fix their videos. And so that was really, I mean, so probably like the first big change there was then deciding to allow basically like PG content only, or maybe PG-13, I guess, yeah.
Kids these days.
I know, I don't even know. So that was actually a big change because everyone who joined, I mean, this was part of the, sort of like the interview process. You had to make sure that they were comfortable with adult content, and usually to be comfortable with adult content, you actually had to feel pretty strongly about like freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And so it was actually sort of something that was core to the group of people and to the users that we had to change. So that was the first big change that we went through, and that was really hard. And I think actually that probably made some of the other changes a little easier, just because we had been through it. We had been through sort of a big announcement to users. I mean, it's interesting, like the whole co-create thing, though, I always am just like, have your canaries, have your beta testers, have your super users that you can reach out to, and you can say like, hey, here's an NDA, here's what we're thinking of doing, like, what do you think of this? And it's not necessarily, like, they might hate it, but then you understand how they hate it and why they hate it, so you can like craft a response at the very least and potentially, you know, figure out how you're going to communicate it that really sort of addresses those concerns.
Yeah, and I mean, people are just afraid of change, right? They may not even, I mean, I feel like I've gotten a lot of like, as a designer, like feedback, like, I hate this, or like, this sucks, put it back the way it was. And like, really what they're saying is they're afraid that it has changed.
2 weeks later, they're still using it more than ever. So
it's about designing like communication around that and to support that and stuff. How do you pick yourself, like, what was your like next move after NING? Like, what was the first thing you did?
Oh man, I went to the chirp party and had a good party. So for what it's worth, the NING layoffs, it was really sad because about half the company left and we were all very close. So yes, we were very close. But so I had been there for a couple years. There had been a lot of changes. So I actually had already started sort of talking to other companies. And when it did happen, it was sort of like a lot of layoffs where people were, well, first of all, NING was very helpful. They gave us severance and they gave us resources. And they said, like, we have recruiters that will help place you. We have recruiters that will help you with the resume. So like they did it the right way. I mean, I ended up actually, did we talk about this? I got fired like 3 times that year from 3 other jobs.
No, let's talk about this.
I mean, yeah, another lesson is if like you don't bond with your community, it's probably not the right fit. No, so basically it was NING was fired once, and then there was a contract that didn't turn into a full-time job somewhere else, and then somewhere else I worked at it for a couple months, and I was just kind of brought on too early. It was a B2B company, and they didn't quite have, like, B2B community is very different than B2C. It usually happens a little bit later because if you're using something professionally, like, you're usually not like, oh, I just want to hang out and talk about this. You need to have a compelling reason to participate in like a community around it.
Yeah, you have to kind of like do the checklist thing. Like that's all enterprise products usually are, right? Like they want to see like you meet a certain amount of like,
Yeah, and then to go beyond that, it's like you're throwing a conference or, there are things you can do, but usually it requires like a bigger user base.
Yeah. What advice would you give Laura who just moved here? If you could like speak to the Laura who just moved here.
I got this.
Okay.
So as mentioned, I moved here in 2006. I didn't get into tech until 2007. So I would have said, skip that sales job that you sucked at. Skip the recruiting job that you got fired from, and get into tech sooner and do what you're good at.
That's pretty solid feedback. I feel like you've thought about this. It's awesome. There's a couple Lauras here. You could probably just go give that advice to them. I mean, they're
She's
obviously,
already in tech. They're
I mean,
like,
yeah,
they
no,
won.
she's good.
Yeah.
She's good. She's that one. That one's doing all right. Okay, so this is actually, I stole this question from someone here that might know you pretty well. But I was asked to hear the story of when you and Lucille met.
So Lucille is my dog. She's amazing. I should have like brought a picture. Right. Like half my friends have pictures of her, probably. I just decided one day that I really wanted to have a dog. And I was actually living with someone at the time who wasn't quite as ready, but I was like, screw this, I want a dog. So I started looking online, and I wanted a schnauzer because I had dog sat a schnauzer named Rocky, who's awesome. Shout out to Rocky.
Shout out.
And he was amazing, and I was like, I want one of those. And my white, fluffy mutt Lucille came up in a schnauzer search for this organization called DPS, Doggy Protective Services, dps.org or something. But they're amazing. They're like this amazing rescue that takes in dogs and like gets them surgeries if they need it. Lucille
I feel like you really like taking care of things. Like you like taking care of people and animals.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Mostly people.
Just thought I would tell you guys
and
that.
Lucille.
Point that out.
Yeah.
Is that it? That's your story of how you met Lucille?
So DPS, they're also like very stringent. It's a 1-to-1 adoption policy. So you can't just like, there's no place to go and just like meet all the dogs. It's like you pick one online, and you put in an application, and there's a phone screening, and
then Amazon delivers it to your doorstep.
No, you have to like go down and like sign all this paperwork.
They screen you. They do a home visit.
I did get a home visit for the Schnauzer Rescue Organization.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's deep. Deep web.
She's amazing, though.
That's awesome. So, Lucille was my punchline, so that joke's over. Who has a question for Laura? Jesse.
So we all deal with, like, whether we're in communities or not, we do a lot of online communication, which is very tricky with the lack of sarcasm bonds and emojis.
I'm going to repeat this. Don't worry.
So my question is just as somebody who specializes in online communication, what tips, tricks, advice can you give us for how to not ruin your in real life relationships with people when you communicate with them online?
Yes. So a couple things. If you're not sure whether or not you should post it, don't. And if you're not sure whether or not you should post it, but you're still thinking about posting it, think about why you're posting it. And like, is it just because you want to be sarcastic and funny? Is it potentially to hurt someone? And I'm not, by any means like perfect at this, but thinking that through has stopped me from posting things where it's like, literally there's no benefit to me putting this online. There's like nothing. So I'm just not going to do it.
Another question? Hello. I know everyone's name. I feel so cool.
Yeah.
I thought it was really juicy when you started talking about the actual things that you and Fiona are doing in Siona Camp.
Sounds like an offsite.
And especially with the no reply and the email addresses, and like you like flew over that, and I was like, ooh, this is the good stuff. Like I know you, so I know your story, so I was like, ooh, this is good. And I would love to just hear you share, even if you just actually expand upon that a little bit further. Like, here's what I was saying. Specifically, the no reply, what I gathered with that is you say, don't actually send out emails that have no reply, right?
Yeah.
And then the other one is when you said text-only emails. Like,
yeah.
So just talk to me a little bit more about some of these, like, sweet little tips and tricks. You don't have to give up your whole kit and caboodle, but I thought that was pretty rad.
No, it's pretty funny because, like, this is what I'm really passionate about. This is my passion project. So, yeah, no reply at whatever. Like, that's just lame. If someone wants to reply to you, like, let them. You want to build in, God, this is so down the rabbit hole. You want to build in ways to, like, deal with bounce backs and vacation messages and stuff like that.
See, but stop rolling over this, because this is things that are obvious to you, but this is genuinely what other people are like, oh, what is she saying? She's mumbling. What is she saying? Holy shit. Like, she really wants, we
set
want
up
to hear
your
it.
rules. So if someone has a vacation auto reply, you're not getting those. But if someone is trying to reach you, you need to make sure that they can. And yeah, like another sort of tenet of a lot of community people is, so there's like this balance between being available everywhere to everyone and like not like, you know, work-life balance. But I think you definitely want to, where you are communicating, you should be available for responses. And yeah, the other thing, so I also have this like big thing around your beta users especially, and I think there's a lot of us here who probably have been beta users of products, and I want, like, so one of the like, this is like just me as a person, I get really disappointed when I beta test a product and I sign up and I probably send some feedback, probably like, hey, don't use no reply, and like I never hear anything again from the company. And then like 6 months later, I read on like some tech blog that they've launched, and I'm like, hey, like I was part of your user, and so I really feel strongly about like, yeah, building those one-on-one relationships. And if you can't do it, then there are people that can. And So that kind of, that's a little bit different than the text-only emails, but it's like being thoughtful about how you communicate with people from day one of your company.
And what do you even mean by text-only emails? What's your...
Like, I think emails should be designed. I think your content should, you know, have intention behind it. And it shouldn't, like, don't launch your product, especially out of beta, where, like, you have a welcome email that's like, hey, thanks for joining, like... And I don't know, you know, there's just like no thought behind it.
What about the argument that it's like high touch, where it seems like the founder is talking just to me, and it's like, hey, Willow, thanks so much for signing up. I'm the founder. Signature, you know, like.
I mean, I think that's better than like something that clearly was done 6 months ago and never looked at again.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, but it depends on the product. And who is the speaker of the product, who's the speaker to the community. And that can be the founder, it could be a community manager, it could just be like the team, it changes.
But branding, is your vote for more branding initially so that it's consistent branding throughout versus just a text email?
Yeah, and I think it's just be aware of how you're communicating. And like, that should be part of, that is, to me, that's as important as like how you're building your technology or how you're, you know, designing your interface. I think it's part of it. Like, how are you communicating with your users? And again, just like every touch point is part of that. Fiona agrees.
I gotta give it to the lady first.
Yeah. Reverse sexism.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I was just wondering, out of all of your experience, if you have and you don't have to name names, but like a nightmare situation and like a dream, I can't believe that happened situation in terms of community and customer service and kind of all of that.
This can't just be life.
Well, I mean, professionally, but sure, you can go personal. It's gonna get weird. Let's do it.
No, I mean, like, I met Jay-Z once. That was my dream. Yeah, right? Yeah, thank you. I did nothing but burst into tears of joy. It's on the internet. Oh my God. Nightmare situation.
Like that you actually went through, not...
No, well, I mean, like, just like really obscure stuff. Like, I remember one time, I remember where like a table in a restaurant made me cry. And that to me was like a nightmare situation because I was crying on the floor of a restaurant like a Saturday night, and like, that's just terrible. Like, I'm like in charge, and here I am just like breaking down because some people yelled at me. Which is like on scale of nightmares, that's still pretty low. And then like the other nightmare situations were really like, again, sort of more personal, but like when I was doing these jobs before I got the jobs in between the restaurant work and the tech work were nightmares for different reasons. I had one job, the recruiting job actually, where my male boss told me that women weren't good at sales. he also told me there was something else like like that where I was just like, wait, what? Why am I here? Like, there's no way for me to be successful. And that was terrible. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, I was going to say like
Jay-Z.
a positive thing.
Well, Jay-Z.
All right.
But also, I mean, actually, no. So this is sort of overarching, and I don't know if I actually expressed this, but like NING was an amazing place to work for the platform and for the users, but like our team there was incredible. And it's the sort of place where like everyone's in each other's weddings today, like years later. Like we're all still in touch and we know where each other works and we support each other. And I mean, I think that's an incredible situation or like experience overall. And I think like if you can find that anywhere, like that is the tits.
Just throwing a at that point.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about the B2B, where it was too early for the community.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you know whether it's too early, and also what you might be able to do if you're kind of before that threshold?
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of learned that the hard way, and part of it might have just been like I wasn't the right person for that. Like, I think I definitely thrive more dealing with consumer than business, but. Man, I think like this is sort of like an indirect answer, but I think what I would have done differently in that situation if I were sort of in charge of it is like bringing someone on part-time or bringing someone on as a contractor, because what I was doing was like calling up every single user like every week because there weren't that many because it was an expensive product or whatever, and that just got old pretty quick for everyone. And there were things like webinars to do, but again, there just wasn't that many people there. So either you bring someone on to do it part-time or potentially you just like, probably ideally initially it's a founder or it's someone on the founding team who has something else to do, because like talking one-on-one to your communities or like to your users when you're B2B, to me, like that's like a no-brainer if you're, selling them expensive software.
How do you make that transition then from talking to them one-on-one to try and get them to talk more to each other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, this is something that Fiona and I kind of do quite a bit of as well. Like, one of our goals always is to figure out how to empower your users. And that sounds really cheesy, but you want to figure out ways, like, are there places within your website, within your application, or just within even your social channels where they can connect with each other? And then are there things built in either to the application or to, the website again, or maybe it's making sure that your emails have lots of things or ways that they can share and ways that they can, evangelize on your behalf. Oh, hello. Sorry, I got distracted by a dog. So, yeah, I think and again, that's kind of, like, you don't have to implement that right away, but it's good to be aware of that and, like, where that can come into your product. Yeah. Is that good? Ligaya, or Lindsay, Ligaya? Yeah. Oh.
It's just enthusiasm.
Yes.
Crowd.
Into it.
Hey.
Hey.
So WhatsApp sold for like however many billions of dollars yesterday to Facebook. Largely because they have like 360 million users or something like that, right? So that...
and they have no marketing spend.
So when something like that comes up, I'm wondering, like, what's next for Signal Camp in terms of... Yes?
We're available for $19 billion. We have 2 users.
No, but that's a company that sold for a lot of money because they have a strong, large, engaged user base. So how are you using Signal Camp to approach more people in that way?
Man, I will say one thing that I think I've talked about with you and other people here, that a good sort of technique to promoting community is basically just saying Instagram, Tumblr, because although now those are like dwarfed by WhatsApp, but like those are two companies that were sold for $1 billion-ish, that were sold because of community. So yeah, I mean, I guess Signal Camp's goal is to just help create more billion-dollar community companies. Yeah, okay. To discuss that. And we take equity as payment, so.
Shout out to equity.
Hashtag equity.
Hashtag equity. It's a nice thing.
I have a question that piggybacks on that. So what were some of the biggest challenges when you were starting your own thing with Fiona, starting Signal Camp initially?
Great question. Yeah. Don't know where you got that. No,
it's
so
totally organic.
So actually one of our biggest challenges in the Bay Area was, so we actually did we spoke about creating Signal Camp for about 6 months before we got our first client, and part of that was talking to each other about what we wanted to achieve, what we wanted to accomplish, but we also spoke with a lot of other entrepreneurs in the area. We actually sort of like, so originally Signal Camp was going to be like a word camp or other, camp products, features, conferences. We wanted to do like weekend workshops because we did like our jobs, and like we were like, oh, we can do this on the side. And so we did user research, and like turns out entrepreneurs were just like, no, can you just come do this for us? So we decided to launch Signal Camp, but all of our resources there, every time we tried to get business advice, they were like, well, like, are you raising money? Do you need, like, how are you distributing equity? And we're like, no, we're just gonna help people and charge them. We don't need that. And so, like, we wasted like a year of time meeting with startup lawyers because those were like the people that we got introduced to by friends. And what it turns out is we needed a small business lawyer, and we needed an accountant who could deal with small business, who didn't care about mergers and acquisitions because, frankly, maybe that'll happen. I don't know. Like, 19 billion.
I heard that as murders and acquisitions, which is pretty relevant. So I think we're out of time, and we have an amazing artist here,
Yes.
Bobby Cespedes. And so if you guys, we're gonna have a dance party. So if you want to help out, like push the chairs back, because we're gonna get it. We're about to get it.
Getting it.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you guys so much.